At dawn, the Atlantic was calm. Too calm. A fisherman off the coast of South Carolina swore he saw a man standing on a broken plank, drifting toward shore. The man did not wave. He did not shout. He did not even move. He stood upright, barefoot, his skin burned black by salt and sun, his eyes open but empty. When the boat pulled closer, the smell came first. Rot. Iron. Old blood. The man collapsed the moment they touched him. This was the year 1848. Slave ships were officially illegal. America claimed the trade was over. Churches preached it. Newspapers printed it. Politicians swore it. But the ocean never forgets what it carries. The man survived, but he did not speak for 3 days. When he finally opened his mouth, his first words were not his name. "They buried us alive," he whispered. Doctors thought he was mad. Priests said he was touched by something dark. The town sheriff wanted him gone. Because the moment the man began to talk, he described something impossible. A port that did not exist on any map. A dock hidden behind marsh and fog. A place where ships still came at night. And everyone who heard him felt the same fear. Not because they thought he was lying, but because they knew exactly what he was talking about. By the mid-1800s, America had learned how to lie cleanly. The law said the slave trade ended in 1808. That date was carved into books, sermons, and history lessons. Children were taught it as truth. Adults repeated it until it felt real. But laws don't erase hunger. Plantations still demanded labor. Cotton still fed the economy. Wealth still flowed upward, quietly, violently. So the trade did not end. It went underground. Small ports replaced big harbors. Bribes replaced paperwork. Churches replaced warehouses. Orphanages replaced holding pens. The system learned to hide inside respectability. And somewhere along the coast, there was a port so well protected that it survived for decades without ever being named. The man from the ocean had seen it. He said the ship that carried him had no name painted on its side. The crew spoke little. The hatches were sealed from the outside. Men died before they even reached land. And when the ship arrived, no city welcomed it. Only silence. The man gave his name as Elias Booker. Records later showed that name did not belong to any freed person, sailor, or citizen. No birth. No death. No ownership papers. Nothing. It was as if he stepped into the world fully formed from the sea. Elias said he was taken from the coast of West Africa years after the trade was ended. He said the ship sailed without lights. That the crew prayed before every voyage, not for safety, but for silence. They told the captives God could not see the water at night. Below deck, men were stacked like broken furniture. Women were kept apart, chained in rows, watched by men who sang hymns while they worked. The worst part was not the pain. It was the waiting. Elias said people stopped screaming after a few days. Not because they accepted death, but because something else settled in. A numbness. A feeling that the ship itself was alive and listening. When storms came, the crew locked the hatches and left them to drown. Elias survived because the ship wrecked before it could finish killing him. And because the sea, for reasons unknown, chose to return him. When Elias described the port, the room went quiet. He said the water turned black near shore. Thick. Slow. Like oil. The air smelled of pine and rust. Bells rang from somewhere inland, even though no church stood near the coast. The dock was narrow, built low, hidden by tall reeds and trees bent inward like watching figures. Men waited there in clean clothes. Not sailors. Not soldiers. They wore suits. Clerical collars. Rings. Children were taken first. Elias said wagons arrived at night. No lanterns. Just the sound of wheels and breathing. The captives were split and loaded fast, like livestock. Some were told they were being sent to work. Others were told they were being baptized. None were told the truth. Because the port was not just a landing place. It was a sorting ground. And once you left it, no record of you ever existed. Elias said the wagons did not head inland toward towns. They went sideways, along dirt paths that followed the marsh, past places where the trees grew thin and twisted like they were sick, past water that never reflected the sky properly. The first building they stopped at was always the same. A church. White wood. Tall windows. No name on the sign. From the outside, it looked harmless. Peaceful even. The kind of place people trusted without thinking. The kind of place mothers sent children alone. But Elias said the church doors were never locked. Because they didn't need to be. Inside, the air was cold year-round. Candles burned at all hours, even during the day. And beneath the floorboards, there were sounds that did not belong in a place of worship. Crying, chains, prayers spoken too fast. The church was not where people were saved. It was where they were cleaned. They called it baptism. That was the word the men used. Calm voices, gentle hands, smiles that never reached their eyes. Elias watched as captives were washed one by one in large wooden tubs. Not with care, with purpose. Scrubbing skin raw, shaving heads, burning old clothes. Names were taken away. New names were written down, not in books, but on scraps of paper that were burned immediately after. No witnesses, no records, no proof. The preacher always stood nearby, reading scripture while it happened. Verses about obedience, about suffering being holy, about silence being strength. Elias said something worse happened after the washing. They separated families. Mothers were told their children were being prepared. Fathers were told their wives were chosen for service. None of them ever saw each other again. And the preacher kept reading. Children disappeared fastest. The wagons that carried them did not go to plantations. They went to orphan houses, places run by churches, funded by wealthy families, praised in newspapers as charitable works. Elias said he saw children lined up, taught new prayers, taught new names, taught to forget their language. The youngest ones adapted quickly. That terrified him the most, because forgetting came easier than remembering. Some children were adopted. Others were trained. Some vanished completely. Elias said there were rooms he was never allowed to see. Rooms where children went quiet too fast. And no one ever asked questions. Because orphan houses were holy places. And holy places were never inspected. Elias began naming names. Not loudly. Not publicly. He told them to a small group first. A doctor. A clerk. A man who worked at the port years earlier. The names belonged to respected families. Bank owners. Landholders. Church elders. Men whose portraits hung in town halls. These families did not own plantations. They owned systems. They funded the orphanages, donated to the churches, paid for repairs at the port. In return, they received labor that could never testify. People without pasts. People without papers. People who could be erased if they became inconvenient. Elias said the port existed because everyone needed it to. Because it fed too many mouths. Because it kept too many secrets buried. Not long after Elias spoke to the clerk disappeared. No body. No funeral. No report. The doctor stopped visiting Elias. Said he was busy. Afraid. Avoiding eye contact. One night, Elias found a symbol carved into the door of his room. A simple mark. 3 lines crossed by one. He didn't know what it meant. But every man who saw it went silent. And that was when Elias realized the truth. The port was not protected by guards. It was protected by belief. Elias understood something most people never do. Secrets do not just hide. They defend themselves. The church watched him. The town watched him. Even the water felt different when he walked near it. He said the port was older than the law, older than the lies, built on habits passed down quietly, like family recipes. You didn't need to be evil to protect it. You just needed to belong. And Elias did not belong. The fire started without warning. No storm. No lightning. No accident. The church by the marsh burned from the inside out, like it had been waiting for it. Flames climbed the walls fast, bright and loud, visible for miles. People gathered to watch, but no one tried to stop it. They said later it was God's will. Elias was there. He said he smelled oil before the fire. He said the doors were locked from the outside. He said he heard screaming long after the roof collapsed. By morning, nothing remained but ash and a blackened bell, cracked down the middle. The town mourned the building. No one asked about the people inside. After the fire, officials came quickly. Too quickly. They cleared debris within days. Hauled away what little remained. The ground was covered with fresh dirt and grass seed. But Elias noticed something strange. The marsh water nearby had turned thick again. Dark. Slow-moving. The same way it looked near the port. He said fire doesn't destroy systems. It only forces them to move. Within weeks, wagons were seen again at night. Bells rang again, this time from farther inland. A new building appeared on donated land. A school. A seminary. Another clean name. Elias began tracing families. Not just the powerful ones, but the missing ones. Entire households that vanished between census records. Children listed one year, gone the next. Widows who remarried men with no past. Workers who appeared suddenly with no origin. He saw the pattern. The port didn't just bring people in. It replaced people. Bloodlines were edited. Histories rewritten quietly. Names reassigned like property. Some families were built on the erasure of others. And they never knew it. Elias began writing everything down. Names, dates, places, symbols, sermons, routes through the marsh. Words he heard whispered by men who thought he couldn't understand. He hid the pages inside a hollow beam beneath a floorboard in a rented room. He said the writing felt dangerous, like the words themselves wanted to be forgotten. But he kept going, because memory was the only weapon he had. One morning, Elias woke up and found the symbol again. This time, it was inside, carved into the table, 3 lines crossed by 1. The landlord said nothing, just stared at it too long. That night, Elias heard someone walking outside his door. Slow steps, patient ones. No knock, just waiting. A stranger approached Elias near the docks days later. An older man, white hair, hands that shook when he spoke. "You don't understand what you're touching," he said. He told Elias the port had existed longer than slavery, that it adapted to every law, every war, every moral shift. "It doesn't serve cruelty," the man whispered. "It serves order." The man begged Elias to leave, to burn the journal, to forget. Elias asked him why he stayed. The man said, "Because it already owns my children." Elias tried to send his writings north. Letters vanished. Couriers never returned. One man was found drowned in shallow water with no signs of struggle. Newspapers refused the story. Editors smiled politely and declined. One told Elias, "Some truths cause more harm than silence." Elias understood then. The system did not need violence anymore. It had agreement. The final journal entry was short. "They are moving the port again. They know I know. If this survives, remember me as proof." The page ended there. No signature. Elias Booker vanished in the spring of 1851. No arrest. No body. No grave. His room was emptied. The floorboards replaced. The journal beam sealed. Officially, he never existed. But the sea changed again that year. Fishermen spoke of dark shapes near the marsh. Bells heard underwater. Planks washing ashore with iron rings still attached. Decades later, workers repairing a coastal road found something in the mud. Wood, iron, bones. And beneath them, pages. Still readable. Still accusing. Still waiting. After Elias vanished, the coast became quiet. Too quiet. No fires. No scandals. No whispers. On paper, everything looked clean. The churches expanded. Schools opened. Seminaries trained young men who spoke softly about morality and order. The town prospered. And that was the warning no one noticed. Because prosperity built on nothing honest always needs something hidden underneath. By the early 1900s, no one spoke of slave ships anymore. The country had new sins to argue about. New wars. New fears. New reasons to forget old crimes. But the port did not die. It evolved. The ships stopped bringing chained bodies. Instead, they brought paperwork, contracts, custody transfers, relocation orders. People were no longer bought. They were reassigned. State institutions took over the work. Orphanages became homes. Seminaries became training centers. Remote farms became rehabilitation sites. People entered the system legally. They just never left. Children of prisoners. Children of the poor. Children no one would miss. The port still handled arrivals. But now they arrived in silence, escorted by law. The seminary stood on donated land. Brick walls. Iron gates. A bell tower that rang every morning at the same time. Students there were taught discipline, obedience, submission to authority. They were also taught to forget questions. Old tunnels ran beneath the building, older than the seminary itself, leading toward the water. Some students disappeared during training. Records said they transferred. No one ever saw them again. The symbol Elias described was carved into a stone beneath the bell tower. 3 lines crossed by 1, hidden in plain sight. By the 1920s, the port served hospitals and state facilities. People with no family, no money, no voice. They were declared unfit, moved quietly, worked until they broke, buried without names. The port fed the system what it needed most: disposable lives. In 1936, a clerk named Margaret Hale was assigned to reorganize old records at a coastal county office. She wasn't looking for anything unusual. That's why she found it. Missing case numbers, duplicate names, death certificates with no bodies. Transfer forms signed by churches, schools, and hospitals, all pointing to the same coastal zone. She followed the trail and made the same mistake Elias did. She wrote it down. Margaret found references to a man named Elias Booker. No birth record, no death record, but his name appeared in margins. Notes, warnings scribbled by other clerks over decades. Do not pursue. Handled. Resolved. She searched the marsh and found wood. Old dock wood. Still stained dark. The seminary burned in 1937. Official cause, faulty wiring. The tunnels collapsed. Records were lost. Students transferred. The bell cracked. Sound familiar? Margaret disappeared 3 weeks later. Her files were marked misplaced. World War II buried everything. People moved fast. Questions stopped. Records vanished in chaos. Ships moved at night again. Not slave ships. Supply ships. No one asked what else they carried. By 1950, the port no longer needed docks. It used roads, trucks, institutions. The water still mattered, because water forgets slower than people. And the marsh still swallowed what the system didn't want remembered. By mid-century, the truth was gone. Not destroyed. Agreed away. Teachers taught clean timelines. Churches preached redemption without confession. Families inherited wealth without asking where it came from. And the port? It stopped being a place. It became a method. In the late 1990s, a coastal restoration project began near the old marsh. It was meant to be simple. Drain water. Reinforce land. Build a road. On the third day, the machine stopped. The ground gave way. Workers uncovered wood laid too neatly to be natural. Planks stacked in rows. Iron rings bolted deep into beams. Not debris. Design. The water that rushed in was black. And it smelled wrong. Archaeologists were called, then quietly dismissed. Bones were found. Not scattered. Arranged. Adult bones. Child bones. Some marked by iron. Some by blunt force. Some with no damage at all, like the life had simply left them. No official statement was made. The site was covered again. Declared unsafe. But one worker stole something before the mud closed. A bundle of paper sealed in oilcloth. The papers were Elias Booker's journal. Waterlogged, but legible. Page after page of names. Routes. Buildings. Sermons. Symbols. And one final passage, written in shaking hand. They think forgetting is mercy. But forgetting is how it survives. The worker tried to give the journal to authorities. They declined. He tried journalists. No response. He posted fragments online. They vanished. One retired man came forward. A former administrator. He said the system never ended. It just learned better language. Every generation thinks it's cleaner than the last, he said. But cleanliness is just silence with better manners. He admitted people were still being moved. Still disappearing. Just legally. Just politely. Because the truth doesn't point to monsters. It points to systems. To churches that wanted order. To towns that wanted money. To families that wanted comfort. To people who told themselves, at least it's not as bad as before. That lie built everything. The symbol Elias described still exists. In old architecture. In sealed basements. In forgotten coastal markers. 3 lines crossed by one. It doesn't mean ownership. It means continuity. There is no dock now. But people still arrive at places they don't understand. Institutions they can't leave. Processes they never consented to. The port isn't wood and iron anymore. It's policy. The sea keeps returning pieces. Planks. Chains. Bones. Because water does not lie for long. It carries memory forward until someone listens. Elias Booker was not important because he survived. He was important because he remembered. And memory is the one thing systems fear. If this story feels uncomfortable, that is the point. Because comfort is how it hid. And forgetting is how it lasted. Some ports never close. They just learn how to look like something else.